Welcome to the summer of unraveling. Just when you thought 2025 and 2026 wasn't chaotic enough, we've reached the summer season in which there's going to be a whiplash of change. Now, this isn't to scare anyone. This is actually something that could really propel you forward into the direction you've been trying to find this whole time. However, we have to play our cards right. Under this cardinal water season that we just got into, Cancer season, summer solstice, we are having to refine our strategy right now. Strategizing doesn't always mean doing the things that logically you're instructed to do to succeed. Strategy has a lot to do with intuition, and sometimes we ignore that intuition because the ideas we get seem a little out there, or we've never seen it done before by someone else. But I feel like this Cancer season invites us into this space of creativity right now, where we might be presented with some really unexpected circumstances, and it's going to challenge us to see how creative can you really get. How deep can you really go into the source and figure out how you're going to make do with what you got? Because there is a deep resourcefulness that I think Cancer has. Capricorn also has this, and we'll talk about this more as we get into the Capricorn full moon energies, which happens at the end of this month, so in about a week. And it's just feeling like we are going to crack the code one way or another. And that moment isn't something that is necessarily the most victorious, glamorous, publicized moment, but it's rather an epiphany or something that internally is going to kind of click into place. And from there, we will have that harvest moment where people will also be able to see the fruits. But right now, it feels like we're kind of locked away a little bit in the lab, I heard. So someone could be literally in a laboratory trying to figure out some type of cure or solution to something, but that could also be metaphoric. And it just feels like we are on the brink of that aha moment. And I feel like there have already been those clarity, lucid moments coming in, especially throughout Gemini season. There was a lot of information. There was a lot of new insights and intel that we were gathering, new thread lines being presented to us. But because a large portion of this month has been spent in the pre-shadow of the Mercury retrograde, there's not a whole lot of resolution that has been ushered in as well, right? And I think sometimes we can get frustrated with that because Gemini likes to know things, right? But Gemini is only the first air sign. So the things that Gemini learns, there's still a higher application that it can go to that I think we're anticipating. So we're like, okay, I figured this part out of the video game. I got this part of the puzzle. Why isn't the full picture there yet? And it's not to erase the progress we've made, but it's like that scavenger hunt energy. It's getting a little bit old for some of us. Maybe we're kind of ready to get things a little bit more consolidated and not feel so scattered by different things that we're trying to pull in. Well, I need this, and I need this, and I need this ingredient, and I need to find this. It's like you have been on a journey, my friend. And your journey is not stopping anytime soon, right? But this period right now, this last week of June, for some of us, it might feel like it's quieter, like a little bit of a calm before the storm kind of energy. And for those of us who are super active and who like to keep very busy, we might feel like we're doing something wrong. Like, what do I need to be doing, right? And I think that this Mercury retrograde, a big message about it is going to say, hey, it's actually not so much about what you're doing all the time. And it's more so about the reason and the intention and the why behind what you're doing, right? So what you do, the action you take does matter. But what matters just as much as the alignment. And so if we're trying to act without alignment, we're going to feel like hamsters on a wheel. But this Cancer energy is showing us the need to kind of bring that into balance, right? And especially today with the moon in Libra, that's a good reminder is that we need both in order for the Chariot to move forward, right? And that's actually the Cancer card in the deck, is the Chariot. And so how do we get that alignment, right? It's not something that we just like think of. It comes from God. It comes from our relationship with God, our walk with God, and our ability to just sit back and sometimes receive redirection in life, even when we don't like it, even when our ego is all bruised and battered. We have to sometimes like really sink back into our feminine energy, right? And I hear a lot of like this discourse in the spiritual community of like, get ready to receive, like be in your feminine, receive, like chase or attract, don't chase, right? And it's not that those are necessarily like wrong statements, but I feel like at the same time, receiving requires a lot of surrendering, which isn't always as easy as it feels like it can be to just roll off the tongue and say, just receive, just receive. Like you have to like actually put your faith and trust in a higher power, in God, in order to receive. And that faith can feel like a fight sometimes, right? And it's like, I'm getting like emotional speaking about this because I feel like I'm channeling all of our energies in this collective, where we've had times where like our faith has really been tested. And we've had these moments where we've just looked up at God, we've looked up at the sky, and we've just asked, why me? Why is this happening? Why can't this ever get resolved? Why is it the same wall over and over? And I heard God just say, oh, you of little faith. Like, but in kind of that playful way, as if we're a child. Like, don't you know how many times I've pulled you out of despair? Don't you know that each time I lead you through the valley of the shadow of death, it's not because I want to torment you. It's because this is the only way for you to grow. And this is the only way for you to also appreciate the blessings that you do have and understand the contrast. Because if we just have the love and the light all the time, we don't understand it, right? And one day when God calls us home to his kingdom, we won't have to suffer so much. But I feel like there's a reason why our souls have been sent here on earth to go through whatever it is we're going through, both the joy and the hardship. The things that come easy and the things that are very difficult are in your life for your highest good and development, right? And this Gemini season has kind of been whispering in this little cheeky tone, as it tends to do, hey, you know what? Well, these are the problems you have in your life, and how smart you are, like, is how fast you'll be able to figure out these problems. So smarten up, you know, stop playing dumb, wake up, see what's actually going on here, and let's act accordingly, right? But I think the way that we kind of left this Gemini season, because we're going into like a very different energy right now, not just because of the Mercury retrograde, but some other transits that I'll get to in a sec, it felt like this, okay, I see it, I know, thanks for the info, but why do I feel like I'm kind of moving through molasses now? Why do I feel like everything's kind of slowing down? And why does it feel so like nuanced and intricate and delicate emotionally to address these things? Like, sure, the solution might in theory be simple, but there's layers here. It's not just a quick decision I can make and then bada bing, bada boom, Mr. Worldwide wanna step in the room. I'm a hustle baby, but that you knew. Why did I just channel Pitbull? But like, it was kind of that energy, right, that Gemini gives us. It's like a little playful, I'm a hustler baby, but it's like, oh, I'm actually not a hustler, I'm just a human. And I'm just trying to do my best out here, right? And so I think that's where we're kind of left off. It's like, well, I have all these ideas and I kind of got some momentum, but it didn't really stick, right? And it's not because, like, again, it's not because God is trying to, like, stop you. it's just, there's redirections that always happen in Mercury retrogrades, right? Like, it is the season for a redirection. This is our second one of the year. And it's feeling a lot different than it did back in, February and into March, when we had the Mercury retrograde in Pisces, which was also another water retrograde. I think just so much has shifted, and not just that, but so much is about to shift throughout this retrograde that we can feel like we're in very new terrain now, even though it's not that far apart. Like, it's a few months down the line, but here we are, and if you guys think back to where you were at the end of the winter, early spring, and where you are now, closing out the spring season and entering summer, I mean, for me, it's night and day, right? And I feel like at that time of the year, we're very much like at the end of the zodiac cycle. So it's like the darkest of night before the dawn comes, in February, March, especially right before that equinox portal. And now it's like we're in some of the longest days of the year. So we're very much in the day. We're very much seeing things clearly. And yet, with the Mercury retrograde, we might find that we change our mind about things even when we have been seeing them clearly, right? So it's not necessarily that we're getting all of this new information, I feel like, but we are making new decisions because maybe there are external circumstances happening that were not precedented, that were unprecedented. So that leads me to another transit that I want to mention, which is the Mars-Uranus conjunction in Gemini, which is the first one ever to happen in Gemini. We get Mars-Uranus conjunctions about every 2 years or so, and they're very jarring, I heard. They can be very disruptive. They can definitely free up a lot of space for new courses of action to happen. But the process of that can very much feel like an excavation or an avalanche. And we're approaching this conjunction on July 4th. So we're already feeling the anticipation because Mars is already within the 10-degree orb of Uranus. So we can feel like we need to stick to the... It's weird because on one hand we feel like we need to stick to the plan, but we also have to be willing for the plan to change a whole bunch and to evolve and to maybe completely fall apart and then come back together. And I think that the more we try to force a particular way right now, the more that we are going to have to deal with the repercussions of that. Like, this is a season of flowing as much as you possibly can. If you are getting swept up by a current, don't try to swim against it, right? That is how you exhaust yourself. That is how you put yourself in danger. You have to just go with it. And it might kind of suck, but once you're along for the ride, it's not so bad, right? You find these moments of like, all right, well, I had to let go of that, I guess. So what's the new thing that might be around the corner? And I'm picturing this image of a lazy river in my mind's eye. And there's like a part of a lazy river where it's like really chill and it's kind of boring. But then all of a sudden it's like the wave timer kicks in, or like something happens and like the waterfall, and like it's like, oh my God, I wasn't expecting that. And it kind of brings this excitement and this momentum into the experience. And that's where I feel like we're at right now. So maybe some of you guys have been to a lazy river lately and that's relevant. But it just feels like that's the vibe this Cancer season. I'm going with it. I'm going to try to stick to the basics as much as possible. But I also realize that there's a lot of complexities in life too, right? And sometimes we say that like, oh, I'm just going to focus on the basics. But even the basics are layered, And so how can we expect to successfully add more layers on and more projects on and make things even more complicated if things still aren't really sorted at the root? So I've been doing some gardening lately, and there's a need to have drainage in your pots so that your plants can be healthy, and they don't get root rot and all of these other diseases, the drainage is so important. And I think with this retrograde, it's going to be teaching us about drainage. Also, lymphatic drainage might be relevant for some people. I know I've been like doing a lot of like lymph node massage and drainage just because I've been a little bit under the weather. Not medical advice, just saying that it might be something that you've been thinking about lately, and the need to properly have drainage, right? And I think about the act of crying and how that's a form of emotional drainage. You guys saw me get a little teary-eyed in the beginning of the video. And I think we have a lot of weird social constructs around crying. Like, it's not like seen as appropriate, except if you're like at a certain, like in a certain context. Or when we see people crying, we feel like, oh, something must be wrong, right? But I actually think that when you're crying, something might be right, because you're allowing yourself to just let it go, you know? And part of the drainage, it sounds so easy to just let go. But I was thinking about yesterday when I was drilling holes in my planter boxes. It was effort, you know, to come up with a drainage system, and to also over time see how well it's working, and to have these kind of check-ins. And so it's not just this one moment, but it's an active system of, as we add things into our lives and as we prepare to receive blessings, part of that preparation is being able to completely purify and cleanse. And that is something that I think actually is a similarity with the Mercury retrograde that we had in Pisces, the last one. There was a lot of that water theme of cleansing, allowing things to pass through your system. But I think the place that it left us off in was this place of feeling like we were at a bit of a roadblock. Whereas I think that this retrograde is going to leave us off at this place of not so much a roadblock, but feeling like so much has already been initiated into this new shift and into this new timeline energy. And there's a lot of catching up to do. I think that's going to be a funny feeling that we have that's different, is that instead of feeling like, what now, we're going to be left with this charge of like, it's time to get moving, honey. And the Virgo energies are going to have a lot to do with that once we get into August and we get out of the post-shadow period. But that's still a little bit of ways away. I think it's still helpful for us to remember that that's where we're headed. We are doing a lot of active work right now to really make sure that the root has the right soil it needs to get anything out that doesn't belong there, and to just get back into this remembrance of why it is that we do what we do, and not get so looped into the what in the story. That's something about Gemini energy, is it can be very much about the story and the narrative that we're living out. And I think that part of this pre-shadow energy in June has been asking us to identify, where do we need to rewrite that story? And also, where do we need to allow the story to rewrite itself? Because sometimes we're so concerned with controlling the narrative and controlling the direction that we forget sometimes the most magical moments of storytelling happen organically and happen suddenly and happen when we're just out living life and we're not trying to think of, oh, you know, it's like we allow the plot to take care of itself, and then we come back to document and write about it, right? Instead of trying to like be always the most clever one, right? Sometimes God is way more clever than we could ever be. And we kind of have to sit back and watch that happen. And from there, we can find our own inspiration to be clever in the way that we tell the story or what we do next. But that inner narrative, I think, has also really been worked on in the month of June, of like, how can I make this narrative more just loving and supportive of myself rather than like working against myself. And I think we're going to need to fall back on that in this month of July, because I feel like July, to be honest, is maybe actually similar to February and March. July is just one of the craziest months of 2026. It just feels like there's this unruliness, there's this wildness, especially with Jupiter being in Leo opposite Pluto. We'll talk more about that in these coming weeks and months. There's just something that's being unleashed and unraveling in July. And I think we can all feel it. And the more we try to cling on to what we're conditioned to recognize as the status quo, the more that we feel disenchanted. And yet, the more that we cling on to things that are traditional, but that connect to a primordial way of doing things, which to me is very much Cancerian energy, the more that we feel like we have our stability and our grounding, even when externally things are chaotic. And I think part of that tradition is human faith and higher consciousness in God, and not feeling like that is regressive in some way, or that it is keeping us from scientific discovery or just intellectual pursuits in general. That faith, spirituality does have a very intellectual component to it, which is why people go to study theology of, any religion really. It has a very like intellectual, there's that Jupiterian quality behind it, Sagittarian quality behind it, the systems of believing and information and the stories and how they all come together to create this like paradigm, right? Like there's this like studied energy about religion, and specifically when it comes to God, it just feels like all of that we can study and study and study as much as we want, but the real tradition might, it might relate to that, but the real tradition comes from our direct connection to source, right? Our direct connection to source is also reflected in how we directly connect to each other. And I think empathy will never go out of style. Compassion will never go out of style. Loving thy neighbor as thyself will always be the golden rule. And that's what I'm saying is right now more so our foundation and our rock, rather than the things of this world. Because the things of this world are unraveling, as I mentioned. And it is like scary sometimes. I'm not going to sit here and just be like, everything's fine. Like, there's a lot of emotions and undercurrents and things that are a part of this. It's not just, we're going to be okay, it's like, but at the same time, that blind faith, when we don't know what's going on and we are scared and we are confused, is the thing that's really going to get us through, and it's going to show us the way and what we actually need to do next. But before we can do, we have to just be, and we have to somehow be at peace, even when it feels like that's being threatened or compromised in some way. So that's pretty much the message, you guys. I don't have much more to say about the summer solstice and the start of Cancer season, and we're getting close to that Mercury retrograde station. So I'm sure we're going to have more and more insights that come up as we go through the retrograde. But I would say just be curious about how this month of June, like the things that have happened this month, how they are going to continue to develop, because it's not, the end of the story now, just because we're in summer and we're leaving spring behind. Like, there's still a continuation of a lot of the thread lines that Gemini season presented us with. Even if we are no longer in Gemini season, we still have a lot of energy going on in Gemini once Mars meets Uranus there. And that is something that I think we're going to be kind of chewing on still. It's like, again, we've been given the information, but we haven't fully digested it or processed it, nor do we really know the full iceberg that we're working with. We've kind of just seen the tip. And that is what it is. It's not our fault, right? It's the timing of how these retrograde cycles can work. And we don't have to like be mad if we don't know everything right now, or if we don't have all the answers, because things are just going to keep changing. And so we're going to look back and say, thank God I didn't know exactly at that time, because if I had, I would have done this, and then it would have maybe I would have missed out on this opportunity if I had gone that direction, So just be open right now. Keep the faith strong. Keep loving each other with all we got. And the tide is high, but I'm holding on. The tide is high, folks. It's Cancer season. We're ruled by the moon now for the next month, and this whole retrograde is ruled by the moon. So that means that every day, every couple of days, it changes, right? But it's also cyclical, so we can predict what those changes are to a certain extent. But then there's also the curveball factor with the Mars-Uranus conjunction. So that pretty much sums up the energies. That's the message. I'll be back again soon. We'll keep talking about this stuff. I love you guys so much. And that's all. Peace.